Good Thursday evening to everyone. It is good to see you, and it is good to be seen by you. And I, being glad to see you and to be seen, am he who is the one and only Bill Sylvie. And if you can figure that out, let me know. Care of the Dungeon Delver, coming to you live, loud and clear, when I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to be. Literally like 10 minutes before we went live, the world was ending outside. We had huge thunderstorms here in Florida. It's just the nature, you know. Our summer is basically bracketed with two mini mean seasons that happen. It's like April severe thunderstorms, and then August, September severe thunderstorms with the occasional hurricane. So anyway, welcome to the show, everybody. I'm glad that you could join us. Let me ask you a favor, if you would, please. If you like my content, whether you're just stopping by, maybe you're watching this video after the fact, like, I couldn't make it to live stream, damn. Do me a favor. More than a thumbs up, more than a comment below. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button and click the bell icon for notifications. And that would be just super cool of you to do that, because it really helps the channel get noticed. We are just that close to 7,100, and when we reach 7,100, we will be on our way to 7,200. There's nothing special about that, other than the fact that more people are joining us for this crazy ride, and I thank you all very much for doing that. But you can give the video a thumbs up, and later, if you want to leave a comment below, if it's the after, you can do that too. So I would really appreciate that. Guys, we have got a fantastic guest tonight. He's one of my favorite guests to have on the show. He is a writer, a developer, a gamer, an all-around swell guy. And if you're one of those people that wanted to help promulgate classic D&D during the drought years, when you know who in Renton, Washington decided to pull the plug on classic D&D PDFs, and it was basically unobtainium. This guy is by and large responsible for helping that happen with products like OSRIC and Swords and Wizardry. But to name those is to literally just put my foot in the splash zone of the shallow end, not even to get in the pool, because he has done so much more. So without further ado, without additional palaver, please let me welcome tonight's guest. And he will also be a guest at the GWOC, the Great Underground Online Gaming Convention, coming up in less than 2 weeks now. Please, everyone, put your hands together for a great guy and a personal friend, Matt Finch. Matt, how the hell are you, brother?
Good. Extra points for using the word palaver in the intro. That's, very.
Hey, man, I was brought up on High Gygaxian, Yeah. What can I tell you? How are you? How's things going over there? You're busy, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, it's pretty busy. I mean, the last 2 days have just been nothing but, crowdfunding, and I'm really hoping to get back to the writing, that I was doing before we actually launched, but it's starting to settle down now. So it's
right on. I guess it's and I don't say this like as a tongue-in-cheek comment or anything like that. You are basically a mover and a shaker. You're what everyone who thinks they're doing when they're making wry posts on social media about D&D. You're actually going out there and getting it done, and you stand on the precipice of a new edition, a new version. I'm not really sure how to frame it, what adjective we should use to call it a new edition. A new version.
we're calling it a new version.
Okay.
Because it's really not a new edition, obviously, but
right.
And it's kind of difficult to do an elevator pitch because there's multiple different reasons for doing a new version of OSRIC. Number one is the license. The OGL is kind of a more risky proposition. A lot of people are choosing not to use the OGL. So, number one is licensing, and we can, use the Creative Commons license and basically, replicate what OSRIC was doing with the OGL. And that's, sort of number one. But number two is that, at the time that we wrote OSRIC, even though it was clear that there were a lot of people using it at the actual gaming table, it still really shows the DNA of being a reference tool. Because at that time, we were trying to preserve the rules because Wizards of the Coast, they were not available legally, anywhere unless you bought an old book. There were no PDFs. There was nothing like that available. So there was the preservational aspect of it. And we're not assuming that a lot of people would be using the books to play. It was more that people would be using it to write, modules and things like that. And it's written just in the older style too of, it's wall of text, which was fine in 2005. But, now people do tend to read differently after we've all been trained on the internet, for year upon year upon year. Yeah. It's a lot easier to read things that has, bullet points and, little subheaders to sort of guide your mind through what it is you're absorbing. And the other thing about the fact that it was a reference tool is that since it was a reference tool, the assumption was that almost everybody reading OSRIC 2 already knew how to play the game. Whereas we've got, a lot of, new gamers coming in who have never played a pre-2000 version of Dungeons and Dragons. And so there's the objective of having this be much more of a teaching edition to walk through, this is why this is important. And so like, Eye of the Beholder and I are talking right now about the unarmed combat, because OSRIC 2.0 had fairly short unarmed combat rules, largely because of concerns about copyright. And as every AD&D'er knows, the unarmed combat is fairly cryptic in AD&D. And it's Gygax that is more wargaming. And so we're working on something that will replace the original, very, very short OSRIC 2 thing with something that is more like the AD&D thing. And so we're talking through, okay, when do you use the AD&D combat system? What are the situations where you're going to use unarmed combat? Because there's a whole tactical side to it. If you're lightly armored and looking to bring, a single opponent unconscious, you're actually better off using the unarmed combat system within AD&D than you are trying to bash them into unconsciousness with a mace or a sword. So, there are multiple different rabbit holes to go down in terms of revising this. But I think we're going to have, and the other thing, of course, too, is that under the, since it wasn't because it was under the OGL, it was because it was the first retro clone that had ever really been done, was that we're a lot more confident now in terms of where the boundary lies in terms of copyright law. So there are some things that we did in OSRIC 2, like ordering the monsters instead of alphabetically, we grouped them into, humanoids, beasts, so on and so. And we don't, now we're pretty sure, you don't have to do that. You can go ahead and do an alphabetical list of monsters. And so we're going to go back to that. There are several things where, something where we were over careful, over cautious on with OSRIC 2, that we can actually get closer to the advanced D&D rules, with OSRIC 3. So, so there's so many different goals going on with this that, it's a little bit difficult to make the elevator pitch.
No, I understand. I mean, this is trying to say, hey, what's new in OSRIC 3.0 is you're turning the fire hose on yourself at that point. But so you guys here are you're crowdfunding this now. I've got the link there, which you guys out in the audience can follow. This is over on BackerKit right now. And how has, I mean, obviously you've done gangbusters, guys. I'm actually gonna share this. We should all take a look. Everybody just have a gander at this. I mean, you've done 117 large. That ain't chicken feed, my friend. But we know how grognards be. You and I both do. I think we both got our our edition war field experience merit ribbons. What has been the talk like on the ground from the folks that you and I would basically both know, have a beer with at Gary Con, that sort of thing? What has been that feedback?
I think well, there's some people who are not happy with the fact that we're doing like a landscape oriented book, but I think most of the grognards are mainly focused on content.
Mm-hmm.
So putting that aside, I think everyone is pretty excited, really. You know, the idea that in some of the areas it's going to, you know, be actually getting closer to AD&D is something that is, you know, exciting for a lot of people. I think I have not heard very much objection to the fact that the rules are going to be presented in sort of a more granular, you know, bullet point type of thing. I think the people who don't like that, you know, it may not be until they actually see it that they're like, wow, this really looks, you know, more modern. But I think in general, people are pretty excited about it. So yeah, I mean, it's been a good reaction among the, you know, the dyed in the wool edition war, you know, old schoolers.
Well, that is fantastic, and you know, I feel like again, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? And you've knocked it out of the park with Backer Kit, 117K. And guys, you can follow that link and go over there and throw in if you want to be a part of the magic of OSRIC 3.0. Now, you know, we have plenty of time. We can put our feet up and be as languid as we like on our approach here when talking about this. So don't feel like we have to do an elevator pitch. So you know me. All right. I tend to be fairly open-minded about things. You know, I'm not afraid to try new things every now and again. But let's say you meet a guy who you suspect is just like me, but you don't know him all the way. He's looking for something to, at the very least, buttress and bolster his AD&D game. What just pick something like, maybe you've got a favorite in OSRIC 3.0. Maybe you're like, I'm damn glad we've got this in now from AD&D. What is something in there that we can really sink our teeth into in terms of AD&D, like in OSRIC, that's new there that wasn't there before?
Well, I mean, we are going to have a monk, but I'm not sure. You know, I'm not a monk player, so and I'm a dungeon master, and dungeon masters tend to dislike monks a lot more than players do. So
we do, and rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, so I wouldn't say that I'm excited about that, but we do have a monk in there that I think is now you know, street legal, which was not something that we could figure out a way to do with OSRIC 2. You know, some of the things are really just, you know, I am glad we're going to do more with unarmed combat, but again, you know, I'm not particularly a big fan of unarmed combat either. But I do think that it adds a level of tactical depth that wasn't really reflected in OSRIC. Of course, you know, anybody using the AD&D rules with OSRIC would just go to that system anyway, so it's not
right.
It's lost. Right. But it does, you know, now we've got more of a complete suite of tactical options using the unarmed combat rules is one. Some things are just things that I was like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that, you know, there was a bust. Like, you know, somebody had pointed out the and by the way, Will Mistretta deserves a lot of credit. He's the guy who did the errata sheets.
Yes, I remember. And I got to say, I'm surprised Will's not out in the audience right now. Or maybe you are out there, Will, and just for some reason you're stumm, but give us a shout if you are. Yeah, Will is like the Matt Finch super fan. So he did the errata for you.
Well, it's not just me. I mean, what he's really good at is just, looking at a rule system, and saying, this is missing, this could be, misunderstood, things like that. So, but what I was going to go back to in terms of the things that, you're like, oh God, I had no idea that didn't get into the OSRIC 2.0 draft, was somebody who pointed out just the other day, if you've got a high dexterity and somebody points a staff of lightning bolts at you, you've got a dexterity bonus on your saving throw against that, and that's not in OSRIC 2. So, and it probably just fell out of the draft somewhere, or possibly when I was writing it, way back at OSRIC 1, it might be that for some reason I was worried about that. Legally, I mean, now I'm absolutely not. But again, things were different, right at that initial drafting phase back in 2005 when we were pretty sure we were going to get sued. But but that's, back into OSRIC 3. So some things are just, odd things that had dropped out. So, I think I'm very happy with how it's developing overall. I should let everybody know, in terms of the status of this, Stuart Marshall has gone through and has done sort of edits to the OSRIC 2 thing, which was what I then started with. There are some parts that he has not done yet, some things that I've done directly. I'm going through Stuart's stuff and, making the changes to it. So, we're not at the point that we have a finished document yet at this point for OSRIC 3. So it's going to be a couple months before these PDFs go into layout. And, I do want to circulate some of that stuff to the general fan base and get get people, looking at where there may be something that, was in AD&D and still hasn't gotten into OSRIC, or, here's a change from OSRIC 2 to OSRIC 3, but I fat fingered the typing. And so there's something that's weird in there, or maybe I didn't do it right. Mistakes, true mistakes occasionally get made as well as typos. And so, just to understand the point that we're at, I mean, obviously we have a complete draft in the sense that we are working from OSRIC 2, which is a complete draft, but that's sort of where we are in the process, is that I think that we're a couple months away from finishing, where we are. And this allows us to, finish the document, find out where we are on the layout, order art, and sort of, bring it all together. But it's going to be a somewhat slower delivery than many of the other ones that we have done, in the sense that, we're not going to be firing out a completed PDF the day after funding comes in. So just so that everyone understands that.
Right. Well, and I mean, I'm a firm believer in if you do it right the first time, even if it takes a while, you don't have to then sweat, flop sweat trying to fix things that you might have gotten taken care of. So I can certainly appreciate that. So, I have to relate kind of a bit of an experience. You're an actual developer, and the people you're working with are actual developers. So you'll pardon me if I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, but as I've been working on a little piece of software, the audience knows I'm talking about. I posted about it on social media. I've gotten a lot of questions like, oh, are you going to support Unearthed Arcana? Are you going to support Wilderness and Dungeoneer Survival Guide? Are you going to support, this, that, and the other in your character creation and management software? And I feel like, the person that says, how about the Ninja from Oriental Adventures, or how about NWPs from the survival guides and so on? Like, I've got to draw a line in the sand somewhere, I've got to say here and no further. And a lot of the interesting feedback I've gotten, and I promise I'm not trying to turn this into a talk about me, but a lot of people, when I've said it does this, and this, and people are, I didn't even know that was a thing in AD&D, and I've been playing since 1981. My DM
Oh yeah,
never
no,
told.
that happens all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
just the other day, and I noticed the EOTB has joined the chat because I mentioned you earlier about how we're talking about non-weapon,
Right.
How we're talking about unarmed combat. We ran across something, just while we were talking about that was something that was like, oh wow, that's in there. I did not realize that's in there. And that was all the time when I was first doing this, back in 2005 when I was first writing this, because I'm one of the group that started with Holmes Basic, and then there was the Player's Handbook available and the Monster Manual available, but I was in the group that was waiting for the Dungeon Master's Guide because they hadn't published the Dungeon Master's Guide. And we were like 10 or 11, and so we just adopted a whole bunch of the stuff from Holmes into it and never upgraded it because we played it with Holmes with the Player's Handbook, but we didn't get corrected by the Dungeon Master's Guide, until 1979. And so when I was sitting and writing OSRIC in 2005, it was just relentless epiphany of, oh, okay, I was doing that wrong. Oh, okay, I was doing that wrong, over and over and over again.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff. And I mean, I guess we tend to view things from like Grom strong in our mountain, laughing at the four winds, as again, Unearthed Arcana, that's extraneous, not including it. Oriental Adventures, that's extraneous, not including it. On and on and on like that. And I guess there's a point at which you say here and no further, no more feature creep. We're just focusing on Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual, bleached out a little bit to get the product identity stuff away. Where is your line in the sand? Is it just those three?
No, there is some stuff in there from Unearthed Arcana, which I think is in there largely because it's something that Stuart thinks fills out the core books. There's not very much from Unearthed Arcana, but I think the ability to do a double weapon proficiency, I think that's from Unearthed Arcana, not from the core books. And we do have that in there, the double weapon proficiency thing. And I did write a thing in there. I'm like, look, this is a high risk, because you don't know if this is going to be the magic weapon that you end up, with in your hands. That's a very risky play, but but that's in there. We have got obviously there are some monsters in there from the Fiend Folio, some monsters in there from the Monster Manual too. We don't have the full set of either one of those. That has a lot to do with intellectual property stuff. In fact, there is a slim possibility that I might actually have to pull one or two of those because of the licensing change, but I'm pretty sure we're okay with a very, very minor change to the name. And the way that we were renaming stuff in OSRIC 2 was, I think, more aggressive than we needed to be. Like we've got in OSRIC 2, there was the Alu demon is, I think, a demonette, and the Cambion is a demoniac, and I'm pretty sure that we can get back to Alu demon if we just change it to Alu ALU demon, and Cambion maybe to a Cambion. I like to try and keep stuff in the alphabetical order that was in the original if I can.
Sure.
A little twist at the end, but I do think we can get a lot of those monster names a lot closer to the originals, even if we can't get it there. And I think that will largely fix any risk there. And that those monsters are in there because there were open game license versions of those that we could put in. Well, now we're not using the open game license, we're using a different license. So we would also have the ability to go to the SRD for 5th edition and use pretty much any monster that's listed in there. So potentially there could be a couple of additionals there. So far, I'm not really looking at going and doing that, just because the length of these 2 books is already fairly considerable. So let me get back to your question of where you draw the line, because we had some people come and talk to us at GaryCon, and they really wanted like non-weapon proficiencies. And I was like, yeah, we're pretty much sticking to the core books for the most part. But what we may do is, possibly the next OSRIC crowdfunding that we do, might be for something like a book of options, like we did with Swords and Wizardry, in which we pull in some of the stuff. But, that's way down the road. I'm not going to really even try and think about that. But, that might be one way of bringing in the options that a lot of people use. But the thing is that most of the people who have not already played AD&D, who do want to play OSRIC, they want to play OSRIC to learn the rules of the game and no more. Don't overcomplicate this for me. I want to learn these rules. I want to know what they are, and so that this is, in a lot of ways, there's a kind of a generational change. Up until now, the vast majority of people running into OSRIC were getting it as a reference tool for a game that they'd already learned how to play in the past. And now it's starting to shift over to where we have a group of people who are like, I just want to learn the rules of the game. And, and OSRIC is useful in that, because there's no question, even OSRIC 2.0, which was not intended as a teaching tool, was viewed as being a whole lot better thing to hand a new gamer than the actual original AD&D books. It's easier to learn when it's organized in the way that you expect it to be done. And so we expect to be able to be we're going to lean into that. This is a good way of learning the rules. So we're going to try and, so we'll see where we get to in terms of optional rules, I guess is the way to conclude that long diatribe on my part. Apologies.
No, that's okay. Don't apologize. I mean, we're here for your wisdom. Now, a question I have, because you touched on monsters, so let's step down Monster Avenue for a minute. And I think really I speak for the entire community who are fans of OSRIC. How are the sphinxes, snakes, and spiders in OSRIC? Have they are they still very well done?
What do you mean?
That's a joke, Matt. That's when the first OSRIC released, I wrote those up. I did their write-ups for them, and said that is the only.
You cannot possibly expect me to remember who wrote up which monsters. I wasn't even working very much on the OSRIC project at the point that we were adding the monsters in. I was still flattened after doing OSRIC 1 when we rolled into OSRIC 2. I wrote the ice code, I think.
Yeah, no. Stu was like, hey, I need somebody to do some grunt work on these things. And I was like, I literally took like 15 minutes and knocked out those critters, which is why my name is in the OSRIC 1. And I guess they just moved them over to OSRIC 2. So first and second release OSRIC.
And we're going to keep all of the contributing authors from the earlier ones. We're going to keep, and they're going to get credited in this one as well.
Thank you. I don't get credit for anything anymore these days, so I do appreciate that. But no, I did just a tongue-in-cheek joke there. I mean, it is what it is. But no, I liken reading AD&D hardbacks to particularly the Dungeon Master's Guide to walking in a fantasy medieval city of Greyhawk, if you will. But it's there's always something around the corner in the Dungeon Master's Guide. There's always something on a page that you didn't know about You thought you knew how that rule worked, but then you flip over to the next page and you're like, I didn't know that intelligent monsters would swing for your head 50% of the time if you didn't have a helmet. You know, and what I wrangled with for days, getting it encoded in software, are the aging rules. You know, they're not optional. You start out, you have an age, and while you can't age out of your class, you will always drop at the very worst down to your minimums. You will age, and if your DM is keeping track of time in his campaign as he should, happy birthday. Your character went from 40 to 41. You gain a point of wisdom and a point of intelligence. You lose a point of strength and a point of constitution. So,
which at this point, I'm not appreciating the fact that Gary worked aging into the game, because I'm aging myself at this point. Not too pleased about
it. Right.
This is a fantasy game.
Yeah, yeah. So, hey, there he is, Will Mistretta. Off the third rope with the metal chair, Will Mistretta. I had to just bring Will on one night. But no, so there's so many things like that. Has it been a challenge to comb through the Dungeon Master's Guide and get every single jot like that out of there to just sift through? Because I mean, I've forgotten so many things that have now been supplanted by all of the stuff in the player's handbook, all the mechanics in the player's handbook for character creation. I've had to go back and restudy for the software project I'm doing. So I imagine that it's very much been kind of the same case with you, of going through and saying, crap, that's right. That's right. I mean, gems do this.
I did that back in 2005. I haven't gotten to that phase of things yet. In this one, I've got, I can't pull up his name, unfortunately, but somebody has sent me a list of things that are in AD&D and not in OSRIC, just somebody just going through. So I'll probably start with that list. But because where I am right at the moment, we're making a lot of organizational decisions. So like, for example, monsters, special attacks, we want to, we're putting those in call out text at the close to the bottom of the monster description, if it's something that can be used in combat. So if you're familiar with the 5th edition books, when you're looking up what the monster does to attack, it's very easy to see because it's in like a block at the bottom of the 5th edition stat block. And we're not trying to duplicate that, but the fact of the matter is that if you are trying to remember the special attack of a monster that you don't know by heart, using the AD&D presentation, you can see a 1 or 2 word description of it up in the stat block, but then it may be buried in the middle of a paragraph and you have to kind of read to find it. And so we're pulling out, this is the special attack. Boom, here it is, with no other words, keeping you from seeing what that is. And that's, all of the special attacks are in there. And then we've actually taken it out of the stat block at the top because you don't, need it. But deciding, there are, for example, there's one section in the monster stat. So, the monster stat block looks like, here's your description of the monster, physical description, social description, if any. And then you go to immunities and resistances, because that's the kind of thing that you want to be able to pull out very quickly, whether it's got a magic resistance. Magic resistance you could always do because it was the stat block. But it's something like, it always sees invisible, or, it's resistant. It only takes half damage from cold, something like that. So we've got all of the immunities and resistances, together in one place. And then other special features like, the Akai from the Fiend Folio is a real weird thing because it's got 2 different arm. You've got to like hurt the legs unless you've got a really, really long weapon, or more simply something like the the bullet, which has, one armor class if you're attacking it here, but a different armor class if you're able to get to the thing at the back. So that's where there's special features that are things that affect the game, but that are not special attacks. And then there's special attacks in the end. Well, it took me like a month to decide on how I was going to divide, stuff into those three particular categories. Stuart had started it already. But so that's, it's just organizational is mainly what I'm working on right now. And then we'll go through and look for completeness and whether we've described things correctly, and so on, and, modernizing it. Like, people who learn how to play using 5th edition are very, a lot of your thinking about 5th edition is centered around a concept of conditions and statuses. And AD&D has those for the most part. If you're described as being stunned in AD&D, it's pretty much the same thing most of the time. So, anything that we can group together into a condition or status, we are. So, like, you are in melee combat. Here's an actual description of, if your condition is in melee combat, here's what that means, all in one place. That yes, you can cast a spell, but you're going to lose the spell if you're attacked, so on and so forth. As opposed to OD&D, where if you're in melee combat, you cannot cast a spell. It's all, sort of grouped together along that method of thinking of conditions and statuses. Now, obviously, in AD&D, you run into the issue of, Gary described something that is almost stunned condition, but here's an additional thing, because he was writing in the days of typewriters, and wasn't copy pasting text from one place to another. Or if he was, it was literally pasting. There's you run into difficulties, in terms of that, but it's a useful, we're trying to address it toward the way that people have learned to play in the past.
Right on. So, you still have yet to go data. I wish you all the luck in the world doing that, because like I said, as well as I do, and everyone out there in the audience knows as well as I do, it is a fun task. And I don't say that with any irony. I enjoy it, but man, the organization of the Dungeon Master's Guide, who among us can say we're experts at using that thing? We can broadly pick out sections, but
EOTB probably can. I can actually list a bunch of people because I'm relying heavily on them.
Okay.
I do think there are some people who are really just encyclopedic understanding.
Well, it brings up an interesting point here, and I think this is not just a comment from a user, but I think I think this speaks to exactly what we're talking about right here, about features and that sort of thing. And this is Felipe Barberato. I hope I got that right, Felipe. As I loved OSRIC 2E, could you please consider adding the weapons versus armor adjustment tables, even as an option to 3rd edition? That's one of those things that, it kind of gets put on the balance. Like, do we do this or do we not do this? Is that north of the line that we draw? And I don't know if you want to address that right now, Matt, or talk about it in the meta sense as being one of those things that you have considered or what, but I just thought that was a good question and point that Felipe brought up. So I thank you, Felipe.
Yes, no, and we've absolutely considered that. And maybe it's worth saying that there's more than one line that gets drawn in here, because content in the books is one thing. The reason, the primary reason for this one is okay. So let me really quickly go through the whole process of the legality on a retroclone.
Okay.
There is no license at all that lets us go to the AD&D books and pull stuff out of the AD&D books. We can do that because of the fair use doctrine under copyright, but you get superpowered when you have got a license to use terminology, and it's usually terminology for the most part. So if Wizards of the Coast allows us to say things like magic missile, armor class, things like this, that large agglomeration. So if you were doing a copyright thing, one of the ways that you would do that test is by seeing, it's got this term and this term and this term and this term. By licensing it and allowing us to use that, they remove all of that, all of these connections of one thing to another that you could have. So the problem with the weapon versus armor class adjustment table is that that is a concept that has not made it into any of the licensed versions that are out there under an open game license. And so, and the other thing is that one of the things that you can copyright, even though you can't copyright the contents of a table that's fair use, you can copyright the format of a table that is fair use. And so when all of these things come in together, the weapon versus armor class adjustment table is legally, we would have to change it, in other words. And the thing is that, number one, it's a fairly unpopular rule in the first place.
It is.
And number two is that, okay, well, if you're going to do a fairly unpopular rule, at least freaking do it the way it is. Don't try and, I don't want to try and fix it, because Gary's, I'm not, I'm really good at rewriting things. I wouldn't really call myself a game designer. So, I really don't want to try and fix something that was an unpopular rule from Gary in the first place, and then have that be there, so that's the reason that the weapon versus armor class thing in there is, I would have to change it, and I don't want to have to change it in, it would be kind of a mess, the final product on that table. So that's really the reason, there. Now in the unarmed combat, that's a similar sort of thing. You have to make some changes, but there, OSRIC 2 left open a relatively large gap in terms of the tactical availabilities of what you could do. Breaking into grappling just wasn't all that different from regular combat. We can get something that is very, very close to the numerical operation of Gary's tables, and we can make them simpler to use, which is one of the big objections to the unarmed combat system. And while it won't be exactly the same, I think that most people going into it would be like, okay, if your choice is not having this at all, or having this slightly changed version of it, they will be like, okay, well, this slightly changed version does what it's supposed to do tactically. It's just not using exactly the same methods. And I think people are usually okay with that. I mean, the oldest of the old schoolers, will prefer that it be, exact. But the thing is that now they have, now that Wizards actually does have these PDFs available, and you can get the books printed on print on demand, it's now a valid choice to say, that's okay. Go use the original books for that, and right. So, in a large way, although a bunch of people hate the disclaimers that Wizards has put on there, I'm really pleased that we're so far forward from where we were at that point. I mean, we have print on demand books of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. In 2005, we thought that it was going to be thrown in the trash bin of history. That's why we wrote OSRIC, was to try and preserve those rules, and having them there where somebody, even if you're like, hey, use this book to learn the rules, but then go over here and read how it was written in the first place. That's amazing. I mean, that's so much better than where we thought we would be in 2005. So, it's a good thing.
Yeah. And you're right. You bring up a good point. I mean, we had a glorious spring thaw, if you will, from 2000 until about 2004 with the PDFs. when Wizards of the Coast was just offloading the job off to Bastion Press. And I always thought it was the height of comedy that at Wizards of the Coast own store, they had an automated what's our hottest selling items this week. When they were selling the PDFs and third edition was still tall in the saddle, that first edition AD&D PDFs consistently outsold third edition right in their own store. That had to chap some asses out there at Wizards of the Coast. So I think the casus belli that they invented, and I don't know if you've ever caught the shows I've done, where I've talked to Stephen Radney McFarlane, who's a former WotC employee. He was there the literal day that they pulled the plug on it. And he said, you guys are making an enormous mistake. You could literally have generations of customers praising you, because if you're not going to do anything with this and you don't want to make any money with it, give it away for free. Put all these PDFs out there for free, and people will praise you endlessly. You will never want for customers, grognards, new players who want to mine old stuff. They will clamor at your feet. And their response to him, the C-suite response to him when he suggested this was, Stephen, you just don't see the big picture. I mean, okay. So, we did get them pulled down, and thankfully the same brain trust. I do remember seeing the messages exchanged between you and those guys as far as please don't release OSRIC. Please just give us 24 hours to look it over first, and all that nonsense. But the reality is that you guys carried the torch into the darkness when this stuff wasn't available, and now that it is, I say this to anyone out there who says, but what about psionics? Because I'm guessing no psionics in third.
Right. No psionics for the same type of reasons. Although somebody did point out, you should at least say that the psionics aren't in there. And I was like, wow, that never even occurred to me. Because once again, this is the whole reference thing. We're expecting that everybody who's ever played the game, already knows how to play it. This was one of those comments out of nowhere. It was somebody say, you know what, you should say that there is a psionic system for AD&D and that you just can't duplicate it. I'm like, yeah, we should. So you don't even think about things like that sometimes, and they really catch you by surprise.
Yeah. So things like psionics and everything else, guys, even if, and I run into this, Matt, and I got to say, on a personal level, let's just set aside objectivity. It makes me break out in hives when people say, like, oh, I love OSRIC. I can't stand reading Gygax's writing. It's just so hard to get through. I'm like, come here. I just want to talk to you. But even if you're one of those people, but you want psionics, but you want weapons versus armor class, have OSRIC. Love OSRIC. Use OSRIC. The stuff is now out there. And I think, now this is my personal opinion, Matt, you feel free to disabuse me of this if you want. I think it's out there because of OSRIC and because of Swords and Wizardry. I think basically you guys walked right up to their doorstep and threw the gauntlet down and said, this is it. What are you going to do about it?
I think that's a definite possibility. I don't have any knowledge of, what all the discussions were, but it was pretty clear, and not necessarily, OSRIC specifically, but, OSRIC kicked loose something where you then had Labyrinth Lord, which was based on Basic Expert, and then Swords and Wizardry based on OD&D. And between those three games, in the very early days of the OSR, there was so many modules being published, and it began to become clear, probably through Drive-Thru, and since I think Drive-Thru was probably talking to Wizards at that point, because clearly there's some arm-in-arm stuff. So drive-through was probably able to give them some sales data on it, and I do think that they probably realized we are leaving a lot of money on the table. And we do know that when they developed 5th edition, that they were specifically trying to get OSR elements back into, 5th edition as part of the thing. So I definitely, things had gotten moving to a point where the OSR in general really couldn't be ignored. So yeah, I do think that we have some, that was probably part of the reason for it.
Yeah. I think it's unquestionable. I mean, every year since 1975, if you look at a sales chart, right, of tabletop RPGs, it looks like Pac-Man. The big yellow part is just Dungeons and Dragons, and everybody else is fit into that wedge. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to make shareholders happy, saying it's only a few tens of thousands of dollars of sales, that rings really hollow to someone who's hanging their retirement fund on how your toy company is doing. So I definitely think you guys with OSRIC, really the entire OSR that people were part of the money making part of, they absolutely made Wizards of the Coast sit up and take notice. Now, I could have written till I looked like the guy from the cover of Kansas Leftoverture, free AD&D modules, giving them out, and Wizards of the Coast would have said, that's nice, and that would have been the end of it. But you guys hit them right at the foundation, right at the base of the pillar with stuff like OSRIC, and they said, wait a minute, these old neckbeards actually spend money still. And that's where we find
because the other thing is, the OSR is not old neckbeards anymore. I think I haven't done any formal data gathering or anything like that, but I mean the OSR is it's bringing in a lot of people who are millennials and Gen Z in particular. I think we're bringing in a lot of Gen Z people, and it's becoming more diverse. It's becoming a much more robust, from Wizards' perspective, customer base than it probably was back in 2005. Because I think people have realized that a lot of what this is just a question of, here's your very complicated game. But, here is one that is, leaves a lot more to the referee or the game master to just, figure out what the thing is. They're two fairly different types of games, rulings, versus rules. And that has built, a lot more people in the OSR than were there before. And I think it's a real contender. I mean, it's obviously only a fraction of the size of the people who are playing, whatever the latest edition of current D&D is or will be, because, that's backed by, Hasbro and Wizards, and it's just going to be big, and it's got, marketing behind it and so on. But, the OSR generally as a group is also a very, robust group of people.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like
you're busy typing in the chat room is what you're
sorry.
doing.
Yeah, I was responding to someone. Sorry. Don't make me turn this thing around. But no, I feel like you're right in that the OSR has gotten more diverse. Now I'm gonna tread into a weird area, and Matt, I want you to be 100% honest with me here, just as upfront and as direct as you want to be. I feel like, and this is my just my 2 cents, and any fellow old schoolers out there in the chat, if you want to sound off on this, I'd love to hear it. And Matt, I'd love to hear your opinion, obviously, as the guest. I always felt early on, and maybe this is water under the drawbridge, that there was almost kind of a disconnect between capital THE OSR and guys who just wanted to play and promote classic D&D, whether they're using OSRIC because they're launching Point Swords and Wizardry, the excellent. I got to get a word in because I actually do like it. Blue Home, which is based on the weird little J. Eric Holmes basic. Uh, Regardless of what it is, and did you kind of sense that there was this weird, almost astroturf kind of movement of the OSR that just kind of seemed to come up out of nowhere? Am I making any sense here? I'm sorry. I feel like I'm kind of stumbling over my words.
Well, I mean, it's definitely changed. I was at a panel at GaryCon with a bunch of people who are coming in much later into the OSR, and there are sort of eras. I mean, there's the forums only time, and then there's and then you get Google Plus, and then you've got actually blogs. So the forums only, then the blogs get added in. Then you've got Hangouts and Google Plus, in that era, and then that folds, and then you get into this much more divided social media where because social media by that point has not been designed to let people cross over easily in one topic. It's basically company. So I'm not my initial goal with the thing. I mean, most of the people who were around on Knights and Knaves and Dragon's Foot when we first came out with OSRIC were doing stuff for free, and that's the group of people who really would like. They really feel that hobbyist products should be given away free. And my view on it was, okay, fine, but number one, don't violate trademarks and stuff, or the hammer is going to come down on the forums where we're gathering here. So it's not a good idea to turn the place into a pirate port of violating intellectual property. And the second thing was that as somebody who cannot do layout, cannot draw, blah blah blah, I was like, what, maybe it's a great idea for somebody to publish something that's just inexpensive, but take some money back so that you can pay an artist to make it look good, look like the old TSR stuff, whatever the aesthetic was that you were trying to do. Pay somebody to do the layout so that it doesn't look like it was like Finch did it in Microsoft Word, which is the way that I did stuff. There's you can improve stuff a lot if you've at least got the ability to go beyond pure DIY in the production of it. So that was sort of what I was thinking was, let's figure out a way to let somebody pay, a cover artist. And so that I had that in my head right from the get-go. So, I don't know. I don't think anything's really been astroturf. I think more what it is that it's like, you're looking one place. If somebody comes from someplace else on the internet or whatever it is, they kind of appear to you to be like, out of nowhere or astroturf or something like that. But I think really it's just that, it's so broad and decentralized that, I really hesitate to call, anybody, astroturf or fake or poser or whatever the thing is. I don't think any of us really has the ability to, point to that. I think there's a very, I'm definitely in the crowd of people who's like, I like my stuff to look like pre-2000 TSR products. I'm unabashedly in that group. Of that, and that's the kind of stuff that I like to produce. It's the kind of stuff that I like to play. It's the kind of stuff that I like to read. But people who are more boarding it out on like, let's do something that's really avant-garde and different. I'm cool with that too. It's not necessarily the stuff that I would prefer to play with, but I like having it out there. So.
Well, as usual, Matt, you have managed to disarm my attempt to get people throwing cups and cans at me by making a completely reasonable argument and a totally fair and acceptable statement. So, thank you. But no, I mm, you know, I'm not gonna make this about me or my opinions on the matter. I do agree with everything you've said. I Maybe I look at it from the wrong end of the telescope, but I did want to say that I heard your comment there talking about things looking like they were designed in Microsoft Word and laid out in there, and I feel seen. I feel attacked. You all saw it. You all saw what he did. Because that, I mean, you know, I was hitting it in like pre 2001 when I was rolling out my modules, and that's exactly what I was doing. You know, I grab an AD&D module and a ruler and go, these columns are each 3.5 inches. All right, let's go to Word 97. You know, what is this font? And they're way back in Web 1.0 days, somebody put together a TSR font fact page. So, okay, let's get those fonts. And I did it. Kids, I don't recommend you do that. It's like, okay, I've got my module laid out. I'm going to put in a piece of clip art. You know, it's like column shift to 3 pages. You have 10, yeah, 10 blank pages explode down the bottom. In the distance, sirens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't recommend that you take that approach. Actually, listen to Matt and get someone to do your layout if you want to get your stuff out there for money.
No, it's a great way to learn, you know, skills too. Is that I did a lot of my, I learned how to draw because of OSRIC, because it was like, you know, we have zero money for an artist, so you know a lot of the artwork, I think all of the artwork in OSRIC 1 was just, you know, it was just me. So I definitely recommend trying to learn. But I do think that, you know, overall, the best of DIY will be tripping on something that the person putting it together, you know, just can't do. You can't do everything at, you know, top level of production. So, you know, having, you know, the ability to put something up for sale without having Wizards of the Coast start barking down your snorkel was, I think, very valuable. And I think that's what really started things rolling fairly quickly at that point.
Yeah. It is. I am pretty much a one-man band, and I go back to Norm Macdonald when he was doing stand-up. God rest his soul, but he said, you know, everybody praised Bob Dylan because he could play guitar and harmonica at the same time. But you know, you all you got to do is put a pair of cymbals between his knees, and he goes from being America's musician laureate to a circus geek. So, but no, it's like that, keeping all those plates spinning yourself. I mean, again, to go back to the software project, I caved in and I had to ask people, I'm like, could you please take a look at this, because this doesn't make any sense to me, as much as, you know, I wanted to carry it forward and just do it myself. And God knows if somebody ever found a way for me to take my 5 or 6 homebrew, handmade, you know, carved from wood using just a hammer and chisel D&D books and publish those myself as they stand, because I have had Temple of the Sun got reworked when Don McVitie had his gaming business going. But if anybody did that, I'd rush them out there. But I know I'd get lambasted for the way they look. You know, it's like 10 feet away, they look like classic AD&D modules. And then the closer you get, you're like, yeah. It's like, what, did you make this with MS Paint and Microsoft Word 97? Yes. So get take Matt's advice, learn the DIY aspects, but for God's sake, if you're gonna get money, do it do it at least semi-professionally. But that brings me to something else, because honestly, Matt, this is you, as much as you and I talk, private message, Discord calls, phone calls, all that judgment test, and tons of forum posts back and forth, and reading forum posts from you. I don't, gosh, is it okay? I'm not asking your permission. This is a hypothetical situation. When OSRIC 3.0 drops, could I just download the PDF, print it, and sell it myself?
When what drops? OSRIC 3.0?
When OSRIC 3.0 drops, yes.
No, because
no, okay.
You would not have the, there is some product identity in there in OGL terms, and there are some trademarks in there. So we've had this question with people asking about translation. It's like, okay, there are going to be 2 open licenses for the books, but neither one of those is enough to actually reproduce the whole rule book. Okay. One of those 2 licenses is dead simple, easy to understand, but it is more restrictive, and that one's based on the Shadowdark license, and it lets you do stuff like, you know, you can copy spells, you can copy monsters, but there's most of this you cannot copy. Okay. And so that's number 1, and that's just because with the ELF license that we've done, a whole lot, even though it's almost identical to the OGL, a lot of people are like, this is just too complicated. I'm not a lawyer. I can't track, you know, this document. That's the one that you would use, however, if you wanted to do stuff that digs, that's more than just a supplement. You know, if you're messing around with rules or stuff like that, you'll want to use the ELF license. And that one, like I said, it's basically identical to the original OGL, except for fixed, so that it's permanent, so on and so forth. But we have had a lot of people, you know, just looking at it and being like, this is a little too much for me to figure out, which I get, you know. So that we'll have both of those 2 different options out there. One of them is the one that's got, you know, extreme guardrails on it, but is very easy to use, and then one that's the ELF license. Okay.
So, man, I feel dumb now, because my whole question was predicated on asking. So, but what about older versions? You know, so if somebody was just like, yeah, I want to, is 2.0 the same way? I guess is what I'm asking. I'm not asking for permission or looking to get an
if you want to call it OSRIC and then use the stuff that is product identity, then you have to get mine and Stuart's permission. And okay. You know, Stuart and I jointly you know, have the OSRIC trademark, which is not to say that we'll say no, because we've said yes to that kind of thing, you know, multiple times. But it's not something that you can do just based on an open license without going and checking. So.
Okay, so I guess I probably should have just gone straight to this point instead of pussyfooting around. But Black Blade, the Black Blade publication of the OSRIC rules. So that wasn't just them saying, "Don't mind if we do," and printing it up. They actually worked with you guys.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And they've got the option to continue printing OSRIC 2.0, you know, if they want to. I got a feeling that may be less, that as a result of what's going on right now, that may be less economically viable for them. You know, so we're talking with them right now about, you know, what do you want us to, you know, send you, you know, books, whatever. So we're working with that, but they do have the option to continue doing, you know, OSRIC 2.0, but a random person cannot just start printing something and call it OSRIC, because it is trademarked. And the reason for that is that Stuart and I really want to make sure that there are no variant versions. We don't want to have something out there that has OSRIC on it, but has been changed by the person who is publishing it.
Okay.
And have the customer base be unsure about what is the real OSRIC out there. So that's the reason that's controlled.
Okay. And that kind of answers the next question is, you know, the matter of rule variants again, because you know, it's all well and good for us to point at big companies and laugh as they protect their IP, but there are certainly, you don't want to see, you know, OSRIC / Fatal on a bookshelf anywhere, right? You know, you don't want something like that with the OSRIC name hanging on it, or and that sort of thing. So that I as I was sitting here, I'm like, you know, I never. And how can Black Blade publish this thing? Did they just grab it and do it? Okay, all right. Thank you. That, and I hope that answers the question for folks. Let me see. Got any questions coming up here? Let's see. Michael Dale asks, and guys, we're into the second hour, so I'm going to be going through, and if you've got questions, please just fire them off, and I'll try and get to them in the chat. Michael Dale says, has Matt looked at dropping the money to print in-house going forward?
Dropping the money to print?
I guess spending the money for you guys to print your own physical copies, I think is what Michael's asking. And if that's not the case, let me know.
We are printing. The main pledge levels here are being offset printed, not print on demand. There is a print on demand option for a different, you know, like I said, the main books in the thing are sort of oblong shaped, as opposed to, you know, when most people think portrait shaped. So there is a portrait shaped option that is print on demand, and also because print on demand may be very important depending on what happens with tariffs, because print on demand, you can usually print in whatever non-USA country you are in, and thereby not pay tariffs on it. But I'm not sure I understand that question.
Okay. You know, one thing I've seen that's interesting, and I saw this come up, and there is a term for this. Maybe you know what it is, Matt. I don't. So I bought a couple of books from a young lady, and she it's Alyssa Hazel, by the way, for our audience. She is doing a panel. She's doing our first panel at the Guac. Matt will be on Saturday afternoon. Alyssa will be here on Wednesday evening for the Guac, so tune into that. And one thing I noticed when I bought her physical books from speculative fiction horror anthology from Amazon, all the way in the back it says made in United States, Orlando, Florida, and about 3 days after, or 3 days before it arrived at my house. So basically someplace here in town printed this up, and it was then shipped to me. You know, this wasn't printed at Random House. This wasn't printed at a print shop in the town that Alyssa lives in. It was printed here in town and sent to me. Is that a thing that smaller companies like you guys could do? I mean, with the coming tariffs, I know China is the cheaper option, but is that something that you know of? Something you guys have explored?
Yeah, well, okay. So actually, we got a clarification in the chat room about what the question was, and it was a much more basic question than I thought it was. I assumed it was a complicated one. The question was just, are you offset printing the books? And the answer is yes, we are offset printing the books. We use a company called Walsworth, which many people in the industry use. They print mainly high school yearbooks. And the reason that, you know, so anybody who's looking for the very, very high quality, built to last bindings, just like Gary went to a company that printed library books, now we've got this company that prints yearbooks. And so they've got the ability to do the very high quality printing where it's divided into, you know, multiple signatures, and then those are stitched together, and then they're glued into a case bound thing. So yeah, we're using probably one of the highest quality. It's the highest quality methodology. It's the best way that you can make a book. mass production wise. So yeah, it is a very, very high quality book. It's not something where we're going down to the local print shop and having that repaired.
Okay.
So now on to the question that you were asking. So Bill, most of the way that print on demand works is that when you go to, and there are even levels of this, like, Lightning Source does print on demand, but your average customer doesn't get in touch with Lightning Source. They get in touch with Drive-Thru RPG, which then sends their order to Lightning Source. But somewhere in there, it gets shuttled. So if you're ordering a book and you're going to have it shipped to you, and you are in France, okay, along the way it's getting assigned to a printer that is as close to France as it can get. And so, like, Lulu is very good. Lulu's apparently got printers all through the world. And so, like, if you're in Brazil, or if you want to, provide something to people in Brazil, the best way you can do it is to put it on Lulu, which unfortunately we haven't been able to do. And we do have a lot of Brazilian customers, maybe at some point. But anyway, so Lulu is probably the most widespread. But Drive-Thru is pretty good. They do printing in the UK, and I think that they have somewhere in the EU as well. And this has been allowing people to avoid customs charges for years and years and years. This has been in place. It's just about to become a whole lot more important and more useful for being used that way, to get something produced within the border where otherwise you would have had to ship it across that border. So, that has been around for a long time, the capability to do that.
Right on, right on. So I'm gonna, I'm gonna just volley this out there because we kind of discussed this a little bit going in about how OSRIC is going on. So I'm just gonna give Orbital Air a quick shout here. When can we buy the 3rd edition book, Matt? What's the ETA on that?
Okay, well, like I said, we're about 2 months away from 2 to 3 months away probably from getting a PDF out to people. We're still in progress on that, and there's somewhere in there we're going to send out probably bits and pieces drafts to the general group of backers to allow people to look at it and say, hey, this sentence, Finch, this sentence doesn't work, or it doesn't match up with ADV or whatever it is.
Right.
So get some feedback coming back from people. And then from there, we've got layout, which could easily be, 2 months on something like this. So that's about 4 months. And, I think the guesstimate that we came up with, that these books would go out to backers, was, probably, I think I said February of next year is when there's an update on, or no, there's an estimate on this in the story page, and refer to that because that was when I had stuff in writing in front of me to try and make the guess. But there were several questions that may push it off because, like, shipping times are, you would think that since there's less shipping going on now, that something would go into a boat and immediately leave and you would have less delays, but apparently they're waiting to fill these boats, and therefore the boats aren't leaving as frequently, and so shipping times are actually getting longer. And then in the printing phase, like, we've always printed in the US, at Walsworth, which does yearbooks, but a whole bunch of people who printed in China are now doing their printing in the United States,
right?
And therefore we're going to have to wait longer, and we're not such a big customer that we can be like, well, we've always been with you. Why aren't you putting us at the front of the list? So it's going to take longer to get stuff printed. But I think the estimate was about February of next year is probably when the books go out, and then at some point very soon after that, because we don't really try and add too much. Like we'll make it available in retail. We do try and make sure that everybody who backed to crowdfunding is getting their books before we put it for sale retail. So
Okay.
Really,
Well,
really long answer to a simple question. Sorry about that.
no, that's okay. I mean, I'm we're trying to ask you the hard questions, Matt. Uh, so, but I did lose my place. I just want to make sure that I didn't lose any questions though while Matt was answering. So let me just scroll right back up here real quick. Um, well, let's address the elephant in the room, Matt, because I know we've talked about this both away from the studio and in previous shows, because uh, the last 2 years since the OGL debacle have been a hell of a decade, haven't they? Um, but just general thoughts. I know it's not greatly or not necessarily, or maybe it is impacting you. I don't want to make any presumptions, but you've seen the release of the Creative Commons licensed uh, uh, SRD 5.2, and now this has come up. Now I haven't gotten in a lot of higgledy piggledy about it, but Wizards of the Coast has just quietly dropped the OGL, any mentions of it, entirely from their website, as far as, hey, if you want to publish, you can, this is something you can do. Do you have any broad thoughts on that, or any narrow thoughts on that topic? And I'll understand if it's kind of a legal minefield you want to steer clear of, but I'm just serving the ball over to you. What do you say?
No, I mean, I think everybody knows that Wizards of the Coast doesn't like the OGL, and that's one of the ways to probably strangle it slowly, is by not mentioning it. They what they can't do is cancel it. Okay,
Right.
but what arguably they could do would be to terminate any new offers of joining the OGL, because the way that kind of contract works is that it's kind of like an open offer. But in a lot of cases like that, you can terminate the open offer as long as you don't screw with the people who already accepted that offer and therefore made a contract. A license is a contract. So, anybody who has done something under the OGL is, I think, completely fine and can continue to, sell whatever it was that they did under the OGL, and possibly even new stuff. I mean, it's a difficult question, but I think the OGL is on limited time. It may be a dead contract walking. So and that's part of the reason why I want to move OSRIC out of the OGL and into the using the Creative Commons license as the inbound license, because that really is going to be permanent. It would be very, very hard to retract anything out of the Creative Commons license. I mean, it's part of the overall reasoning.
Right. So obviously, any legal stuff that Wizards of the Coast says or does for creators, whether it's you guys, whether it's Gaxland, anybody out there working in this space, it's kind of one of those, what's the old adage, when Wizards of the Coast sneezes, everybody gets a cold. So when they made their great leap forward recently with the 5.2 SRD, and here you guys are in the trenches, you're boring out the block, and you're putting new heads on and everything like that for OSRIC, and then bam, here comes the new SRD. Obviously you're not going to stop your work, but does something like that give you pause? And how do you adapt to it? How do you how do you ride the waves, so to speak, in those situations?
Well, it actually makes it easier, because I mean, 5.1 is out there for permanent. Now we've got 5.2. I already described the way that a retro clone makes use of this. It's just gets covered. It's just coverage on everything that's in there, right? So what do I do about that? well, for to use 5.1, you've got to, put in a disclaimer. Here's my disclaimer on 5.1. Now all I do is I hit return, and here's my disclaimer on 5.2. Boom. Now I've got double coverage. I'm making reference to both of those two Creative Commons things. I don't even care what's in them. I can go and look if there's something I want, like the aboleth, for example, is I think in 5.1.
Mm-hmm.
And if I wanted to put an aboleth in, in fact, I've got an aboleth in the draft. It's just probably coming out again because it's not in the it's not in the encounter tables, blah blah blah. But I did an aboleth for practice on doing monster. If I want something, I can go and look for it. But I don't really care very much because all that I'm doing is making that reference as an insurance policy that any words or sentences that happen to accidentally correspond that you're covered on by making that reference. So I'll just add a reference to the second SRD. That's likely.
Right on. So it's just take it in stride and keep on moving. I like that. I like that a lot. I did not mean to fat finger your comment here, Skinhound, but I think it's a fine time to get your question in, Matt. If you want to field this one, what kind of changes will we see with the character sheets and the VTT stuff? What I dealt with, there was very little OSRIC portability in the VTT.
Well, so this is part of the reason that we're focusing on Foundry is that on Foundry, there is an excellent OSRIC 2.0 compendium. So, you can start playing AD&D using that, now, although I think there's a $50 license fee that one person that the DM has to pay. But I might even be wrong about that. I don't use VTTs. And to the extent that I have, I'm not familiar with Foundry. Going to have to get very familiar with Foundry, but the entirety of OSRIC 2.0 is there in the OSRIC compendium. I've seen it in operation, just recently about how it interacts with stuff on a map, and it's tremendously good. So on Foundry, that's a very that's exactly where you want to be. In terms of portability, we are planning on coming out with a free PDF that has a description of how to do it on other VTTs, so on and so forth. But I think the main answer that we've got right now is here is one VTT, and here is an almost perfect solution for it on that one, and then we expand out from there. So.
Okay. Interesting. And again, thank you for the question, Skinhound. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit and see if I can catch any questions I might have missed. Let me see here. So I guess then the question you might that I might ask you, Matt, but I think I already know the answer is
that's the best kind of question.
That's the best kind of question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's next? And I'm guessing probably a slug of whiskey and put your feet up, and then not think about D&D for a month or two after this drops, right?
Oh no! Like I said, we've got more work to do on this, so
Okay.
And I'm going to be working. We're not actually doing any more crowdfundings, this year. We've got books that are at the printer right now. They haven't actually started printing. They don't start printing until this is exactly the sort of delay that I've been talking about. The Tome of World Building books are simply waiting to queue up at the printer, and as soon as they do, then we've got all of the, got to get it over to the UK, get it delivered around, but that's all relatively under control for that one. But having to finish off the actual OSRIC rules, get all of the stuff done to fulfill OSRIC, that's going to be all the way to the end of this year. So we're not doing any more. We often do 2 crowdfundings a year. We're only doing 1 this year because OSRIC is going to be it's got so many components to it. The 3 modules, have all got to get edited, and got to order art for them in addition to the books themselves. So no, it's actually going to be a really, really busy year. So to whatever extent it's nice that we have gotten, obviously it's going to make enough money. We don't have to worry about paying the rent, getting kicked out, while it's all going on, because it's been very successful, and it's obviously going to be successful. So that gives us the luxury of being able to say, okay, now we're going to just focus, settle in, and get it all done, the best that we can, and fulfilled and out to people without getting distracted by, oh my gosh, we need to do another, crowdfunding to make money. So that's good.
Right on. So, OSRIC, and then more stuff like that. Now we've had you on the show when you've been talking to our friends in Greece about software. What's on the software front right now?
Nothing active on the software front. I mean, we are going to work on getting the tables from Tome of World Building added to the Fantasy Adventure Builder, but that that's again probably something for later on in the year, because that's going to probably be about 3 months of work that doesn't actually make any money at all, because we're just putting it into something that people already have. So
right on. So but by the way, if you guys are curious about that, that's actually that is an app. We did a fantastic, God, I think we went for almost 3 hours on that one, didn't we?
Yeah, could have been.
Yeah, that was a big live stream, and I'll go back, and I'm going to put the backer kit link in the description below, and I'll link to Matt's other projects. It's a really super cool piece of software, and we had a lot of fun playing with that, and I'm glad I have it now. But anyway, so let's take a look. We had this up earlier. I'm gonna see if I can. Well, it says if I do that, let's do that. There we go. Now we're back to it. So we have the video. Hang on a second. I'm getting a little bit of a noise in my headphones there. We have the video here. Do we want to just play that, or do you want to just kind of tell us what's in it? It's up to you. It's your call, guy.
Okay, I have one thing to raise is if it plays that music on your video, if YouTube picks up the fact that it's on another video, you may get a warning from YouTube with them suspecting a copyright violation.
Okay, I have muted it then, so hopefully. Yeah. Hopefully,
and I'm not sure it's the same without the music. There's a heavy metal riff behind the.
Oh, well, you know what? Let's just scroll down, and you guys should go watch the video then. Don't let's deny it. It's grandeur just by watching it silently. But
well, a lot of people, I mean, there are some people who hate it. People either love or hate this. And, someone's comment on, Reddit was that, I'm guessing Matt Finch is a metalhead. So, just click on, at some point, most of the people here have probably already clicked on the video. So, if you haven't, you go ahead and click on the video.
Yeah, I mean, hell, if I thought I could get away with it, Matt, I would have like Led Zeppelin music on my
exactly. No, Led Zeppelin is it that
yeah. Because I am very close to releasing my software. So anyway, moving right along. So we have the basic introduction. I shouldn't have to tell you folks out there what if you've been watching this stream all night and you're still wondering what OSRIC is, I can't help you. But let's see here.
I think we've actually covered almost everything.
I feel like we have, but this is something. So there's this criminally tiny thumbnail here, Matt.
Okay, well, the reason it's is that Susie is not happy with the mock-ups, and part of one of the things is that, like the adventures, we don't have the final cover art for all 3 of the adventures, and so part of the thing here is, okay, it's going to be kind of small, and that's just, the way it is. So we'll get some bigger stuff up there later.
There you go. All right. Well, that's cool. So you can kind of get an idea if you get your old man glasses on like me, or hold down control and hit plus 10 or 12 times of the landscape layout. But it is going to be a landscape layout. And I'm gonna admit, and this is you can see it right there in front of me. I got a DM screen. I like the idea of having a DM's book you can grab and use as a DM screen. Also, that's pretty cool. Have you got like?
Let me tell you the main reasons though that we did this, and
all right,
it all goes back to what product that's a book that has to lie open flat while you're doing something. Has to lie open flat. It's a car repair manual. Every car repair manual ever printed is done in this. It's called oblong format. And the reason is that you can open it up and it pretty much lies flat. And I'm a big fan, actually, of spiral or spiral type binding because of that same thing, that it stays open. But I'm also a bookshelf snob, and I can't stand spiral bindings on the actual bookshelf because they run into each other. They get in the way of the other books.
They get tangled.
They get tangled. Yeah, that's terrible. And so what this is it's I think this is something where I'm taking a risk, but I think this is actually going to work largely better at the actual gaming table for what it's actually supposed to do. So we'll put it out there. So, but yes, it's what's called an oblong format, because landscape is when you actually twist it and it's and the text is in the wrong orientation of the spine. So this is called oblong. The fact that
I see. Okay. Oblong. Wave and mutilation there. Spiral bindings are the devil's work. I don't.
Spiral. I love spiral binding at the table, and I hate it on the bookshelf. So,
I have all of the copies of chainmail I've ever owned have all been comb bound. I don't like comb binding.
No, comb bound is terrible.
It's just awful. Anyway, so we've got some adventures out there. Now, are these currently available, or are these planned for OSRIC 3.0?
They've all been written, and I think they've all been extensively play tested too. One of the things we went to, we started asking around, who is it that's writing the really good advanced D&D adventures, and then went and talked to those guys. And so
so you needed people who could write good D&D adventures. And you found some. Good for you.
Yeah, I did. And when I want people doing D&D adventures, Bill, I will talk to you. But
no, don't trouble yourself, Matt. Anyway, go ahead, describe. I'm kidding.
It's an interesting thing that we've talked
yanking
about.
Your chain.
No, anytime that you want to do a.
I know, brother. Right? I know, absolutely.
But you're too busy being a big YouTube star.
That, kids, is what we call damning with faint praise. But go on.
Yeah, they're so simultaneously, wonderful and sad at the same time. Employee of the month,
I'm the employee of the month every month here at the Delver's Dungeon. But no. Let talk about the adventures. Gosh darn it.
Oh well, they're the first thing is that they're all advanced D&D as opposed to OD&D basic. And there is a real difference in feel, I think, between the adventures that are, and there's certainly some overlap. When we do adventures in the future, some of them we may dual stat for OSRIC and Swords and Wizardry. But for the most part, it's going to be either OSRIC or Swords and Wizardry. And actually, we were talking with this about some people on our Discord just today, because some people were like, "Well, what do you think the difference is? Is it the one's more sword and sorcery?" And I'm like, "No, it's kind of like, OD&D tends to be like more wildly good or wildly bad results, whereas OSRIC is a little bit more, restrained in, how bad or how good things get. It tends to, not, suddenly drop over a precipice kind of thing. So there is, I think, a difference. And these are guys, who've got a very good rep out there. for specifically advanced Dungeons and Dragons adventures. And so pulling those in. When we mentioned on the Discord, something about Fortress Tomb of the Ice Lich, somebody popped up, this has been played out there a lot. Somebody popped in and like, I really like that adventure. Just random person on the Discord, but somebody had played the adventure. So, extensively play tested, and really focused and targeted toward advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Right on. Well, EOTB out there is saying Fortress Tomb of the Ice Lich is kick-ass, balls to the wall.
There you go.
So let's see. And a GM screen. We love us some GM screens around the Delver's Dungeon. And again, Susie, thank you. We can't see a big one because she doesn't like the layout. But there you can see, guys, it is a oblong, not landscape, oblong GM screen. I do like my GM screens a little bit taller, but that one looks pretty nifty. I'm not going to lie. And VTT resources, as we were just talking about, which I just invoked his name. I think EOTB is working on those. Yes.
Yeah. He's doing the compendium side, and then AD&D Mike is doing the development side. I did notice one question on the thing that we want to be absolutely clear about. Is someone was asking the question: is this a reimagining?
Yes,
or is it a clone? No, this is a clone. In fact, this is the objective here is to have an even closer clone than what OSRIC 2 was. And there are a few differences in the details here and there because of the two licensing things. But this is definitely it's built off the chassis of OSRIC 2.0. The things we're making, are descriptional or legal, but this is a clone. It's definitely not a simulacrum. It's definitely not a reimagining. The objective here is to do as close a clone as we can legally manage.
Right on. Well, there you go. And I love being able to tell people that when people ask me about OSRIC, I'm like, oh no. This is not kind of like AD&D. This is not like, no. This is as close as can be. This is the M1A2 to the M1A1 of AD&D. If you know your tanks. So let's see. And then we've talked about YNU version, but are there any points here that maybe we didn't go over that you wanted to touch on, Matt, on the YNU version?
Supporting DIY and third-party publishers, I think we covered. That's that thing about the two licenses. One of them is designed. If you don't have any legal knowledge, the other one is like the OGL, but we are discovering that some people run into difficulty with the legalese. Affordability. Yeah, I guess it's maybe important to mention that the PDFs of the two books are going to be free after the Kickstarter. In fact, what we're charging for in the PDF pledge is not for the two rulebook PDFs. It is for the other PDFs. We may charge, for the portrait, version of the PDF at some point, maybe, but those two landscape ones, they're going to be free, which is to avoid an additional war between OSRIC 2 and OSRIC 3, frankly.
I laugh, but the second I chuckled, I realized, no, we're gamers. There would be.
Oh yeah, no. So those PDFs are going to be out there for free. So that I think is the important information about affordability. And then there's a price comparison to the original. If you actually went to drive through and got the original AD&D books, it's somewhat more expensive than what we're doing here. But like I said, I would really like to see people treat OSRIC as a learning tool and learn with OSRIC, but definitely everybody should take a look at the High Gygaxian language and the way that those books operate, because you're really losing a flavor element, if nothing else. How this stuff works.
And those of you who maybe you're just swinging by the first time, just to catch Matt on the show, and you haven't watched before, first of all, thank you for stopping by. But I was serious when I said at the beginning of the live stream, reading the Dungeon Master's Guide, it's like a secret guidebook to the city of Greyhawk almost. I mean, you can wander around in that place for hours, and you can read the book for hours, and around every corner is some beautifully, richly, baroquely described rule or section of rules, stuff you can take in out. And Matt, I'm sure you've heard this too. I mean, how many times have people said to you, yeah, I don't play AD&D anymore, but my God, the Dungeon Master's Guide, I've got that.
Oh yeah.
And I use it in any camp. I use it in sci-fi games. I use it in modern horror game, you know, because it's just that damn good. So
Right.
I'm with Matt on this. Get OSRIC if you need that rules clarification, but please let that take you back over to AD&D for the richness of the experience there. I'm sorry, I waxed lyrical for a minute. Let's continue, Matt. So affordability, and then we get into the changes. Wait a minute. This is the damn minute. This is a typo, right? Option for ascending armor class.
No, that's real.
We're going to have words after this, so Matt. No, I'm just kidding. I just gotta play the grumpy grognard. So options for ascending armor class. You know it. I know it. A lot of the folks out in the audience know it. That's just an easier concept for people, and I'd rather not that be the gate that is kept for some people. We can teach them descending armor classes later. This is
the first step, is the default option in OSRIC 3 is still descending armor class. It's going to have the dual notation, which we've discovered with the OD&D set is really not a problem. Once you get used to it, your eyes do a thing, the first time you see it.
Right.
With those brackets. But really, an equally crusty group of grognards, the OD&D players, really don't have any problem with seeing dual armor class in there. And it is I think that's probably the biggest bar with, a 30-year-old, or even 40-year-old millennial gamer who has always used ascending armor class. If it's kind of like, if there is no option for ascending armor class, I'm just not going to play it. It's the same way that we've seen, going. So, because, there are plenty of millennial grognards at this point.
That just doesn't compute. I know there are, but that's
started with third edition.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely, just as neckbeardy as I am. So,
yeah.
The
D&D I played when I was a little kid was third, and it's like,
yeah,
oh God.
But that's the biggest bar is whether or not you've got the option for ascending armor class, and so it's an option. And the other thing is, and we're going to describe it in an isolated section, because one of the things about ascending armor class is it's actually quite elegant. Is that you for those who don't use it as a formula, all you need to do is add a base to hit number to the various classes that then goes up with level. And if you peg that right, then the ascending armor class is exactly the same as your target to hit number. And so that's a neat little thing about ascending armor class. And so that will be it will have to be in an isolated section, because if you're using that formula, you cannot use the table that gives you the pre-calculated to hit number for our ascending armor class, because if you do and you are using that additional bonus, then you're throwing the numbers off. So the formula for ascending armor class and the explanation of ascending armor class will be in one particular section that gives you the base armor classes. And since it's in that section, it won't upset, those of us who don't like to have our tea stirred, too rapidly. So,
right.
So you'll have this dual notation through the whole thing, but it's not. It doesn't get in the way. Neither one of those two systems actually gets in the way of the other in terms of describing stuff.
Yeah, and again, it's a place, if that is the draw, if that's the honey that I can get somebody in with, and then 2 months later they're like, hell yeah, armor class -5, baby, I'm kicking ass, then it's done its job for me, rather than, you mean I gotta learn THACO? And no, you don't have to learn THACO. We have charts, people. But no, that's all kidding aside, that's fine. Encounter distance added to combat sequence.
That was one of the things that I really thought was in OSRIC too, but it's not. Just the random encounter distance.
Yeah. What is it? 1d6 plus 4?
It's different for wilderness and for dungeon.
Right. It is surprise dependent outside, and it's like, depending on how many segments of surprise you take off a certain number of pips on each die that you roll for the encounter distance, which can be really funny, because having done like encounter distances, it's like, all right, well, you're all surprised by the herd of elk there, roll the dice, 10 yards away.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, it happened because it began as a dungeon war game, and you needed a way to calculate that. And really, even the outdoor system was also, a war game with random encounters. So that was, a real key piece of information. I mean, I think what we've got in here is a little bit simpler than what Gary did, but there is now, encounter distance in there. Like we said, there is a monk class.
There is a monk class. Now, the initiative sequence, I don't envy you guys that doing the initiative sequence system, and I'm eagerly looking forward to the next iteration.
That's done. That's done. The only change that we're talking about here is a change from OSRIC 2, and it's this. There's so much. It's one of the least intuitive parts of AD&D is that if I'm rolling my d6, that I'm rolling for the other side, and I rolled a 5. Okay. And the only reason that you're rolling for the other side is that Gary wanted a high roll to be one that benefited you. Because I can do the exact same thing, roll that dice, but have it be for me, and I'm going in 5. The same 2 dice get rolled. Not a single thing changes. It's just that you roll for yourself as opposed to for the monsters. And since you're rolling for yourself, the lower result is better. There is no change whatsoever to the system. But it means that people don't have to go through that weird, why am I rolling for the other side? Why are they rolling for me? It's the only instance where you roll for the other side in an entire game. There's no change whatsoever. But all that it says is you roll your initiative die for yourself, and you go in that segment. So it's not a big change, but it's a
very
real
interesting
for new players.
Very interesting. Now one thing, this strikes me a little odd. Okay, in its item saving throws, I would not have thought that many electrons would go down to talk about item saving throws. So maybe give us a persist on this and see what we've got going on in item saving throws.
Well, how this list originated was that I'm posting a running list over on Knights and Knaves of all the changes. In fact, there are several that did not make this list. And like my example was the blind hunt has, I think it's an animal intelligence, but it has an alignment of chaotic or neutral evil or something like that. And it's like, so you know what? I'm bumping the intelligence up to semi.
Sure.
Just because it's got an alignment. Okay. That kind of thing does not make the cut for getting mentioned on the crowdfunding page. But, all of this stuff was basically copied from the thread at Knights and Knaves, where I'm just, if I do a thing, I try and remember to post it up and edit the post to put it in there. So the reason that item saving throws has more words described is just that I was either more verbose that day, or I felt like it would need more explanation or whatever it is. Oh, it's because it was the first place on the list where it's actually getting a little further away from the AD&D rule.
Right, and that's kind of what I wanted to.
Posting something on Knights and Knaves, and you're saying, "Hey, we're moving further away from the AD&D rules." You justify yourself, so that's.
Yeah.
you know, it's going to be a little bit less identical, and that's for legal reasons. You know, like you said, you know, Wizards of the Coast is looking very carefully again at what people are doing out there. They're, you know, they're pruning the hedges of their licensing. So, you know, I'd rather not get sued if I can avoid it.
Yeah.
And then, like, number 6 is an absolutely trivial point, but it's just that in OSRIC 2.0, you know, the gnomes and halflings were completely limited to leather armor, and in this one, they are only limited to leather armor if they want to be using their thief skills or their magic user skills. It's a very angels on the head of a pin level distinction.
I gotta admit, the 1 or 2 times I ever talked to anybody about that in 1 or 2.0, they were just like, yeah, I just ignore that. If the halfling wants to wear chainmail, they're fine. And I'm like, yeah, you know. But
I don't even remember what changes I made to the fighter. Oh, the XP tables. Yeah, they're the XP tables.
Right.
So,
I everything I'm seeing here, I'm liking. This is this is all solid stuff. And then there's a light. We've already talked about the licensing that you guys have got going on now. I mean, you know me, I like to write an adventure or two every now and again. If I'm publishing a module for OSRIC, does that kind of go into this framework, the elf license or the short license when it comes out? Does that where that goes into play?
Yeah, the elf license is basically like the OGL. So I mean, there are really 2 issues involved. You know, when you're publishing under a retroclone, is, you know, the ability to say that it is OSRIC, and, you know, that will be. I guess we need to do a thing that actually accesses the elf license, but you'll be able to, you know, to say this is, you know, OSRIC compatible. That's already baked into the short license. And then the second thing is the access to the contents. So, you know, all that you would do, you know, for the elf license, what you have to do, you got a couple of things to say up front, and then you copy the elf license in the back. Operates a lot like the OGL. For the short license, all that you're going to need to do is basically say, you know, it's published under, you know, this license, you know, with the exact name of the thing. And I haven't fully worked that out yet, because I can't. I talked to Kelsey. She's like, sure, you know, use the Shadow Egg license, but I do have to make some adaptations to it, because, like, if you're using OSRIC, you're going to have to correctly do the attribution back to the SRD and the Creative Commons. So I have to, you know, include the fact that you have to do that, and also. Anyway, so the legal stuff, you know, we know what it's going to look like. There's a few, you know, little changes, but all that you would have to do, you will go to a you know, a PDF or a web page that will give you pretty clear instructions about, if you want to publish something for OSRIC, this is what you have to do. Right on.
You know what? Do we want to take a look at some pledge levels you've got going here?
Well, we're already at the 2-hour mark. And
okay. All right. Well,
so if and I think we've fielded any questions that people had.
I think we have. I think we've kind of kept up with them as
I think if there were real questions about the pledge levels, I think somebody would have raised those.
Sure.
There are the unexpected questions, like, you know, yes, this is definitely, it's offset printed in very high quality binding. You know, somebody didn't know. You know, where we were getting it printed. Yes, it's highest quality printing. That one.
All right. So I've got the.
Make sure I say that, but anyway.
That's fine. No. That's fine. We want to get the good word out there. But the link is once again in the chat, guys. I'm going to put this down in the comments below. The link to the backer kit, to some of the awesome other projects that Matt's got going on. And have we left anything, any stones unturned, Matt? Anything that that you wanted to discuss?
Not that I can think of. No, I mean, thank everyone who's still watching at this point, 2 hours in. First of all, thank you for that. And secondly, do you still have the ability to get payments from people while they're watching for a cup of coffee? Because Bill, give some cash to Bill if you have the ability to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you for backing the Kickstarter. If you have backed the Kickstarter, we really appreciate it, and we're going to come out with what I think is going to be a very, very good product that is closer to AD&D, has a more usable license for those. What I really want to see happen here is that OSRIC sees an upsurge in DIY and cottage industry publishing in the same way that basic D&D has, in the same way that OD&D has. I mean, OSRIC certainly has got thousands of modules out there, but I would really like to see it sort of reignite, because so many people now are coming to the OSR and they're thinking, oh, the OSR is only about BX D&D and OD&D, and there is a third elephant mammoth in the room with those two systems, which is OSRIC, which is advanced D&D. That is a phenomenally good system. I'm going to say this too, for AD&D, one of the things that is really good about AD&D, you can play 12th level, 20th level characters. The game system holds together flawlessly, and that's not true. That's not even true with original D&D.
Yep, it really, really does, and
it's fast. I mean, it's obviously way slower than it is when you're first level characters, but it's nothing like the 20 minutes for each player at a time. It's still pretty fast at that point.
15 minutes of fun crammed into 2 hours.
These rules don't break.
They don't. And OSRIC is a bulwark to that durability, Matt. And thank you so much to you, to Stu, to all the guys who have helped make this happen over this 20-year ride.
We've got 48 people still watching. My hat is off to the 48 of you who made it all the way through this.
Yeah, believe it or not, people actually do sit around and watch my live streams. It's a crazy thought, I know. But anyway, thank you, speaking of bulwarks, to those 48 people. And it actually doesn't show you, Matt, but I get views over on the X side of the house too. So but anyway, thank you all very much for being here tonight. David Mills wants to keep it coming. Skinned Hound is super jazzed. You guys are a super audience. Matt was a super guest, and he will be joining us again at the Guac. So be there in a couple of weeks. I will put all the links out there. I will talk your damn ears off about the Guac. And we really appreciate Matt's participation tonight.
And that's everybody. You can directly ask me questions, because we're actually on a phone thing, via Discord. So that's you can
so you guys can talk to Matt too.
That's Bill's online convention. For those who don't know what Guac is, he runs an online convention, and through Discord, and I get on there for my little panel thing, and there's so that's. If you do want to get into a situation where you can be talking to me directly, that's one of the ways to do it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Dave, it's a virtual convention. All you got to do is fire up your laptop, my friend, and put a sun lamp on and pretend you're down here. Matt, it was a great pleasure having you here. Thank you, AD&D Mike, for the super. I appreciate it. You quite literally help keep the lights on around here. We'll let Matt go into the green room and get some Hennessy and pistachios. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this evening. I will be back tomorrow night. You guys will be back tomorrow night, and I'm going to irradiate some people in first edition Gamma World. So everybody take care of everybody, and we will see you all then. So be good to each other and watch out for the dreaded owl bears. Peace. Good night. Love you all.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle way off course? Naked as a toad all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take me to the show.